in Iraq. As a consequence, I learned a very great deal about the consequences of war on civilian populations, particularly those completely uninterested in the battle and just being caught in the crossfire. So the MDM that you see after my name is a master's degree in disaster medicine from WHO. And because I focused on humanitarian medicine, and suddenly there was a great need for a humanitarian medicine physician in Iraq, I became the Minister of Health. It was nobody's idea, particularly not the US Congress, but the guy that you see up there next to me with the glasses at the head of the bed is Skip Purple, wonderful human being, and he was the man who'd been chosen as the Minister of Health when we went into Iraq in March of 2003. He was fired by the Bush administration before he could take that role. The man on the gurney is a good friend, the Deputy Minister of Health, that he had been shot that day, and I was the last physician standing. So that gave me an opportunity for a few weeks to watch the disintegration of a society from the top down and from the bottom up. It's a very unattractive thing to watch, and you learn a lot about vulnerabilities inside the medical profession and outside the medical profession, and just how many things are related to keeping people secure. This is on the list of things that I learned back then, but was only quantified this year. And that is, if you can digitalize health information, you manage to take information that you did not know about and move it through your systems faster, and you move it with many fewer errors. So you wind up being able to intervene in an outbreak or an injury in ways that save lives, save money, save resources, and reduce the possibilities for social unrest in populations that are dissatisfied with otherwise governmental performance. I'm here representing Singularity. I teach there, I've taught there for about 10 years. Singularity is neither about the singularity nor a university, so it is a complete misnomer. What we care about is the impact of exponential technologies across society, across the world, from top to bottom. We look at personalized genomic medicine at the top 0.0001% who can afford such things right now. And we look at the impact at the very bottom of the pyramid, as C.K. Prahalad said, just how exponential technologies can democratize things that used to be the privilege only of the wealthy. Singularity was formed by the 8 organizations that you see up there, and we have many, many partners like Ashoka, the World Bank, CDC, several UN organizations, and so forth. We look at exponential technologies because that's actually the manifestation of what all of us in the room probably know of as Moore's Law. The idea that computational capacity doubles for any given unit of cost about every 2 years. And Moore, Gordon Moore, former head of Intel, founder of Intel, thought that this would last about a decade, and it's lasted half a century. We keep doubling and doubling and doubling and doubling. And that cascade of computational capacity has had ramifications in all kinds of things that didn't exist when Gordon Moore first formed his law. All the things that you see up there, robotics you heard about earlier today, nanotechnology, sensors, synthetic biology, and all the rest, you see 3D printing right out here in the hallway. All of these things are because computers are designing faster computers, and those faster computers are doing work that humans find useful. And we're discovering things are possible that were not possible before. And that's why we talk about the 6 Ds. Once you have the capacity to digitalize something, let's say it's a song, and you take the analog signal that is a music track, and you cut it into little tiny pieces, several things happen. When you stitch those pieces back together, you find that you really don't have very much noise anymore. So we are now used to hearing really beautiful music, and every bit of that music with very little hiss or pop or crackle. Then as those capabilities get better and better and better, you cut into smaller pieces, you get higher fidelity. Initially, it doesn't look like it's very much of a big deal when the capacity has doubled 2 or 3 or 4 times, because 2 times 2 is only 4. But when it's doubled 34 or 35 or 36 times, you're talking about improvements in the billions. And now you're talking about music that is not merely cutting a single song into something that you like to listen to, but you wind up disrupting the entire music industry because you have dematerialized from a room full of 33 RPM records down to thousands of songs on your phone. So everything you once owned on an album is now in your pocket. But then you get demonetization. It becomes so cheap to do this thing that not only do you get your entire record collection on your smartphone, you get everybody else's. You get every record that's ever been recorded digitally. You get millions and millions and millions of opportunities to listen to new music because it costs almost nothing to give it to you. Demonetization. It doesn't cost anything anymore. And out of that, you get democratization. Because if something that used to be very, very expensive, like a room full of albums, is now completely free for everybody, now you've got 1 billion more people who can enjoy the sounds of music they never would have had access to. And you find that you stimulate creativity. You find you have new composers, you have new arrangers in places where they hadn't even known instruments of this kind existed. Democratization, the last and most important of those 6 Ds. If something like Singularity University is going to look at the impact of exponential technologies, we hope to do it for a reason. We don't merely want to improve the amount of music that people can hear. We want to look at how exponential technologies can be applied to what many people these days call global grand challenges. Global grand challenges are on many lists. The USAID, DFID, UN, CDC, Harvard, all kinds of people have lists of global grand challenges. And so they should, because we now have the capacity as a society to begin to address them effectively. There is actually the capability of reaching something like abundance despite the horrible news that all of us hear every day. There's a groundswell of good things happening that is likely to bring a lot of capability to a lot of people who didn't have it before. What I'm talking about today is a little bit of water, a little bit of global health, and a little bit of disaster resilience. As a consequence of spending a little time as the Minister of Health for a war zone, I wound up understanding a bit more about what constitutes human security, what the impact of doing something about a global grand challenge might be. So we have this informal little diagram that is just for fun. It's a little bit like Maslow's hierarchy, but not really. It's about if you have stability, political stability under the rule of law, you can probably have a happy and successful society. It is not the only thing you need, but it's probably one of the necessary things that you need. So I promise I'm making no money doing it, okay? I'm sorry. Next is the set of wicked problems that you kind of sort of face here in the Caribbean, and Guyana in particular. I listened at the University of Guyana yesterday. I was there all afternoon, sitting in the back, taking notes, changing this presentation to accommodate what I heard about the place. Because it's not reasonable for me to sit on my island home near Seattle and try to guess what you're going to want to hear about. So I redid it all, and they were kind enough here to take the new version yesterday so I could talk about this. You probably have as your overriding grand challenge the future of work. You really have an issue arising here. You have extractive industries arriving. You have a forest that you have protected with the Norwegian government that is unmatched on the planet as far as I can tell. Your resources here in forestry seem to be among the best in the world, and you've taken very careful care of it. Yet you've got that competing idea of an extractive industry that is actually not going to be continuing for very long. This is a complex set of problems you're trying to address. You need the money. You've found the resource. The resource isn't healthy for the world. The resource is dwindling in utility, and yet for a short period of time, you'll be able to derive benefit from it that will have generational advantages. That's a lot to balance. Transparency, I like that. So they put it yesterday in the University of Guyana in quotes, right? We're actually talking about corruption. And it's on the list of things that you're trying to address here very effectively. You seem to be working at it quite hard. And how to enable technologically favorable legislation so that you begin to build the things that you want to do to become something like Singapore or something like Norway rather than someplace like Nigeria, which is another possibility you have on your plate. And then there's climate change. I come from a nation that has a federal government at the moment that seems to be denying that climate change is taking place. And I'm sorry about that, really. I'm so sorry. And yet, that same US government has just published this 392-page report for free, available to you from me if you like, that has diagrams like this on page 13. And there's no arguing with data that looks like that. And you can reproduce that data across a dozen different specialties in climate science and in oceanography and in biology and biodiversity. And you'll find that you can get a very consistent picture, and we all know those diagrams. This room, I don't think, has any issue with climate change, but there are large swaths of my population, the US population, that does seem to have a problem with that, and that's really stupid. Sorry, is that I'm being recorded, that's really awkward. I'm sorry, it just is a denial of fourth grade arithmetic. You have a problem here with sea level rise. This is a diagram on low elevation coastal zones from the United Nations. And as you'll notice, your Caribbean basin has a lot of red around it. So does the Brazilian Atlantic coast. You have real issues with sea level rise where large fractions of the population are well within the problem zone and are going to have to move, or somebody's going to spend a ton of money in mitigation strategies that will keep that sea back. Good luck with that. But that's not most of what you face. You know very well what you face. You face earthquakes and hurricanes. I don't think Guyana actually faces hurricanes all that much. But your neighbors do that are here in the room. And I've responded to a number of your earthquakes and hurricanes. And I took that picture of the cyber cafe that dropped to the ground on a bunch of people in downtown Port-au-Prince. And the photograph of the woman is a famous photograph from Reuters. I want you to know this number, because most people have missed this in the way that demographics are unfolding. You have no particular population problem here in Guyana, as far as I could discern from my reading and the conversation I heard yesterday. But the rest of the world, which is climbing up the same ladder you are, is climbing up hungry. When we talk about 2 billion more people added to the planet by 2050, we're talking about people who are living in the informal settlements on the edges of cities in the developing world. They don't have water, they don't have power, they don't have communications much, they don't have much in the way of provided transportation, they don't have much in the way of education, they don't have much in the way of hope. Right now, the World Bank statistics seem to show that if you can get from a rural village to a slum in Nairobi or Mombasa or Lagos, it takes about a generation to get from that slum to a little tiny apartment. But then you're on your way. And when you have that little tiny apartment, you are already, in most cases, an order of magnitude better off than you were when you were in that rural village where nothing has really changed in 400 years, especially if you're female. So what we see is a migration to cities, perfectly understandable, but the result is going to be an awful lot of people who have a lot of expectations.